Hello everyone. Welcome to the lab activity portion of this training program. If you've watched the previous training sessions, we have covered a lot of information and have been building a groundwork of knowledge that's going to help us complete these exercises ahead. We'll start each lab activity with some presentation material to explain the task. Then we'll go straight into the software in our MOVIDRIVE demo to accomplish the activity step by step. If you are following along, there should be a folder or a link to download the lab instructions. There are 11 separate lab activities that we will go through, and the instructions are what I will be following to demonstrate the task at hand. Let's get started with our first lab activity and introduce the MOVITOOLS MotionStudio software that we will be using throughout these exercises. If you're using a MOVIDRIVE through these exercises, let me remind you of some important points. The MOVIDRIVE is connected to high voltage and it can maintain a charge for several minutes even after the power is switched off. Don't touch any wiring, terminals, or the end of power supply plug connectors because you could be shocked. Always use metering equipment to check for the absence of voltage before you touch any of the encoder or high voltage cabling. We will be changing inverter parameters throughout these activities, and in a training course with constant parameter changes, it's possible that the motor or inverter could make scary noises or have unexpected behavior. If you lose control of your MOVIDRIVE or motor, you should have some way to switch off the power supply voltage immediately to the inverter. You should know where the nearest e-stop or disconnect switch is, and it should be quickly accessible. When we're connected to the MOVIDRIVE over the USB to serial converter cables, the PC recognizes these as COM ports. I will show you how to select the correct COM port in the MOVITOOLS software, but it's possible that some PCs will have software access limits that don't allow the USB cable to be recognized. If you have an issue where the USB cable isn't recognized and switching to a different USB port doesn't resolve it, you will need to contact your IT department to assist you. An alternative to the USB cable is to use an Ethernet cable from your PC to connect to the MOVIDRIVE. The MOVIDRIVE will need an Ethernet-capable option card to have this ability, but it's possible to engineer the MOVIDRIVE over the network, and I'll be showing you how to set that up. Our software is versatile, and it's possible to achieve the same result in different ways. In these exercises, I will be showing you the method that I prefer, but you are free to explore the software, and if you find a different method that works better for you, then that's okay too. A lot of times we open software at our desk on an external monitor. There are times when we undock our computer and then use it elsewhere that the software that we opened on our external monitor no longer shows on our laptop screen. Closing and reopening the software still doesn't bring it back, which can be very frustrating. If this ever happens to you, there are some tricks to get the software screen back onto your main laptop screen. Let me show you how to bring that software back. On the toolbar of your main screen, you will want to hold down the Shift key on your keyboard while right-clicking over the program with your mouse to bring up an alternate menu. If you don't hold down the Shift key while you right-click, you will get a standard menu instead that won't show the feature you need. When the alternate menu pops up, you should have an option that says Move. You'll want to do a normal left click with your mouse to select it. Then you'll use the directional arrows of your keyboard to move the software in small increments back to the laptop screen. The direction you have to move the window will be based on how your external monitors are configured. In this example, the external monitor will be positioned on the left at my desk, so I have to keep pressing the right arrow to move the software window back to the right. Once you do that, you should be able to open and close the software, and it will continue to show on your laptop screen, so you don't have to do this each time you open the software. Like most inverters, the MOVIDRIVE has a parameter tree where functionality can range from simple control to complex control based on how it's configured. A lot of these parameters you may never need to change from its default setting, but we will be going through some of the most common ones that will need to be set appropriately for almost every application. When you first open the parameter tree, you will see 10 parameter groups ranging from 0 to 9. Each one of the groups will have a plus symbol that will expand the group to show the subgroups inside. You will double-click on the line item in the subgroup to open it. Once you do that, you will see the individual parameters. To make these individual parameters easier to locate, they are assigned a 3-digit number. The first digit is the main group number, the second digit is the subgroup number, and the third digit is the single parameter to reference or change as you see fit. If we needed to find parameter 101, which is a common parameter that sets if the MOVIDRIVE should be using the digital inputs for control or something else like the Fieldbus, we will expand the main group folder, number 1. Then our second digit is a 0, so we will double-click on the top line item to open Set Point Selection. And our third digit is a 1, so we look through the list until we find a 1 for the third digit, and there it is. Parameter 101. Now don't be alarmed that you'll have to learn 900 plus parameters. This is just a numbering system, and there are a lot of parameters in the MOVIDRIVE, but not over 900 parameters. As you learn the parameters, the F1 key on your keyboard will come in handy. To get it to work, you first have to select the parameter that you want more information about, then click the F1 key. When you do that, a help file will pop up showing you some detailed information about that specific parameter. If you want to use your PC over the Fieldbus with MotionStudio, the MOVIDRIVE will need an Ethernet-based option card installed. The Ethernet option cards will default to an IP address of 192.168.10.4. Most of the time, this address is changed during commissioning to match with the IP address range of the upper-level PLC. However, if you need to force the default IP address to get connected with your PC, you can do that by switching the dip switch that says def IP. It stands for default IP. You'll change that to 1 and then power cycle the MOVIDRIVE. Once the MOVIDRIVE finishes booting back up, the IP address will be set to the default. If you want to go back to a custom IP address range, you will have to remember to change this dip switch back to 0. Otherwise, your custom IP address parameters will keep getting overwritten with a default every time the MOVIDRIVE is power cycled. Whether the Fieldbus option card is using the default IP address or a custom IP address, you will need to know what it's set to, because in your PC, you will most likely have to set a manual IP address to be able to scan into it with the MotionStudio software. I'll show you how to make that change with a Windows 10 PC. You'll first want to click on the Windows icon in the toolbar to open up the area where you can get to your settings, which is this gear icon. Once you're in the settings, you'll want to choose Network and Internet. In the network settings, you'll be able to see your Ethernet and your Wi-Fi cards. Whichever one you choose is depending on if you're going to be using a port on your computer or a USB adapter to Ethernet, or if you're using your Wi-Fi card. So that will completely depend upon how you're getting into the MOVIDRIVE over the network. In our example here, we're going to choose Ethernet 3. Once we double click on Ethernet 3, we will get a separate pop-up, and then we can click on Properties on this pop-up. Then the menu will change, and then we can select IPv4 settings and then click OK. You want to make sure that you change your hardware card to use a manual IP address by changing from automatic to use the following IP address. Then you'll want to set that IP address range that's available for you to use and a subnet mask. Now, I can't tell you what to set here because that will completely depend upon how your network is set up. But for this example, we're just going to use the default IP address range of the MOVIDRIVE if you would happen to set that default IP switch on the option card. So I'm going to set the PC to an address that is different than anything else on our network. It can't be a 0, the 4, because that's the MOVIDRIVE option card, and it can't be 255. So it's got to be something other than at least those 3 and then possibly any other device that will be using this range as well. For this example, I know there's nothing using .100, so I will set the last 3 digits of my IP address to .100. Now, the default subnet that often works for a lot of situations is 3 sets of 255 and then a 0. If you happen to be using a custom subnet mask, then you will need to change this for your network. I usually don't set the default gateway, so I just leave that blank and then click OK on any other settings that may still be open, so that way you're completely out of your Windows settings. All right, let's move over to the demo unit and start working with our MotionStudio software and show you around. The first thing you're going to want to do is open up MoviTools MotionStudio. If you don't have an icon on your desktop, then you can search for it in your Windows program. I have an icon here, so I'm going to double click on this icon to open it. Once the software is open, you'll be presented with this screen to either create a new project or open an existing project. If someone happened to send you a project folder from a machine that was already commissioned, then you can click on this Open Project item here and then click OK, and then you'll get an option to be able to find and search for that project. But since we don't have that, we're just going to click on New Project and then click OK. I'm going to give it a basic name. I'm going to store it on my desktop. Then I'm going to uncheck this limit device name to 14 characters. You can read this exclamation point to determine what that does, but just in case one of the devices happens to have a name longer than 14 characters, I don't want to truncate that, so I'm going to uncheck this. Then I will click on OK. Now, if you are paying attention to the background, you may have seen this folder pop up. So what we have just done is we have created a folder that this software project will use to store files in. If I double click this folder, you can see that it already has a launcher file that will launch MotionStudio, and then it has a user data folders and then a views folder. So none of this is super important right now, but we'll come back into this after we back up our parameters so you can see that there will be an additional folder created once you back up parameters to your project. So I'm just going to close this and leave it in the background. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure we are in online mode. If you pay attention to the bottom corner of this software, you can see that it says offline and it has a gray background. So to switch to online mode, I'm just going to go to the taskbar at the top, and then you'll see this green plug where I can switch to online mode. I'm going to select that. Now you can see in the bottom left corner, it is online and it has a green background. If I wanted to go back offline again, then I can just click the red plug. So these colors right here and plugs alternate. The next thing I want to do is you can see it's already added in the USB to serial converter cable because it is currently plugged into my computer. But if you had opened the software before this cable was connected, this may not be here for you. So I'm going to delete that just so we can create it from scratch, just in case it's not there. So if your cable does not show up, what you'd want to do is the only option you would have is this network. So I'm going to right click on network, and then I'm going to choose communication. Everything will be blank. You can set up to 4 different communication channels that would run simultaneously. So I'm just going to choose channel 1. And then the option I would want for the USB to serial converter cable is the serial. The next thing I need to check is this edit button. And then here is the COM port number. Sometimes you have multiple COM ports on your computer, and the software may default to a COM port that the USB cable is not currently plugged into. So you need to check this and make sure that your COM number has USB in parentheses. That is the one that is currently active with the USB to serial converter cable. So I'll select this, leave the baud rate to auto, and then click OK. And then click OK again. Now the next thing I can do is, before I right-clicked on network to get to communication, but now I can right-click on serial and choose network scan. Now what it did is it found the MOVIDRIVE that is downstream that I'm connected to. Now personally, I prefer to use the right click of your mouse to get the menu items that you need to set up the project, but you will also have this tool start page in the center. So if I wanted to switch between online and offline mode, I have those same icons that are up top. They are right here in the center of the screen. They do the exact same thing. If I wanted to configure the communication without doing a right click, it's right here in the center of the screen. And I can click that and then configure the communication. And then I can also do a network scan right here as well. So it doesn't matter if you right click or if you choose to use the tool start page, but I prefer the right click because it gives me all of my menu items in one place. I don't have to tab between this tool start page to find the information I need. So whichever method you use is fine. This is what I was talking about, is the software is versatile and there are multiple ways to do the same thing. But going forward, I'm going to continue to just use the right click method to get to the menus that I need. The next thing the lab instructions tell us to do is to examine the parameter tree of the MOVIDRIVE. So to get to the parameter set, you need to first select the MOVIDRIVE. If you're using your tool start page in the center, you will see that it just changed to a bunch of different options specifically for the MOVIDRIVE. But what I'm going to do is just right click on the MOVIDRIVE and then get the menu for it. And then the parameter tree is nested inside of Startup. So I'm going to go down to Startup. And then here it is right here, parameter tree, and select it. It opens in a new tab, and you can see the tabs at the top of the screen. So if I wanted to go back to the tool start page, I just click this tab, and it takes me back to the tool start page. Or I can go back to the active parameter tree tab, which is right here, and select into it. The first thing in the parameter tree that I want to show you is the unit information tab. So I will double click on this. It takes a second to load. And then this is all grayed out. You can't set anything here, but what it's giving you is just some basic information about your MOVIDRIVE. You can see the model type up top. You can see the operating mode that it's currently set to, all of the option cards that this MOVIDRIVE has, and then the current motor parameter set that is loaded to the inverter. Now I'm going to close this. And then we can also see the 10 parameter groups. Now the reason there's 10 is because we're starting at 0, so it's 0 through 9. Now if I click this plus icon, we can see the nested subgroups that are inside of this main folder. And if I double click into any of these, I can actually see individual parameters for each one. Now currently the way my software is set up is that way I can have stackable windows, but yours may not have this by default. It depends on what settings you have on your MotionStudio software. If you want to see it the way that I am looking at it, there is this icon above the pencil right here to the left of the screen where you can display tabs. So sometimes the software defaults to displaying tabs only for all the different parameters that you open. But if you want to be able to see the parameters side by side, you have to click this icon one more time to alternate it back to displaying windows. I personally prefer windows, so that way if there is any extra space, I can fill that with multiple different parameters, so that way I can evaluate them at the same time without having to click between tabs. The next features of the software you have is the window tab here at the top icon row. If I click on this, you'll see this option that is currently set to show tabs, which means that I have these tabs at the top of the screen, but I can change that to be show windows. And then now I have two windows. Sometimes they'll be side by side, but if they're not, you can change this to be cascade, which may be the default for you, or you can go back by window and then say tile windows, and it'll use any available space and fill it up with the window. Now this will be helpful if you had multiple drives you're connected to and wanted to see maybe the two parameter sets side by side. That's when this would be helpful. But other than that, I personally do not use this feature. So to go back to the tabs, I would click on window and then just show tabs. And now I'm back into tabs that would be at the top of the screen. If I had multiple devices with multiple parameter trees open at the same time, then I would have multiple parameter tree tabs here for each individual device that I have it opened on. As you learn the MOVIDRIVE, sometimes you may not understand what these parameters mean, and that's okay. So a quick way to determine what they mean is to use the help file like I mentioned before. So say for instance, I don't understand what this motor utilization percentage means. I can select that and then press the F1 key on my keyboard, and then it will open up the help file for that. And it tells me that this is the thermal loading of the connected motor in the range from 0 to 200%. And you can do this for each parameter you see in the MOVIDRIVE. Now sometimes there is a quirk and it may not jump exactly to this parameter. And if that happens to you, all you have to do is click through this list and then find the parameter if it happens to jump to the wrong one. Now I'm just going to close this. And you can call this up as many times as you need to. So I can select a new one and then press F1, and now it's going to call it up again, and then I can close it and then keep doing that for each one. Now let's say, for instance, that you want to be able to look at the MOVIDRIVE parameters over the Fieldbus network and not over a serial to USB converter cable. We can easily change the network in the MotionStudio software by coming over to this left-hand pane here and then now selecting network. The reason I'm selecting network is because that is the item that I need to change. I don't currently want to make any changes to the MOVIDRIVE or to the serial. I want to come all the way up to network and make changes here. So now I'm going to right click on network. My menu is going to be specific to the network node. And then now I'm going to choose communication. And I'm going to change serial to Ethernet. Now it is possible to just add another node here and then have Ethernet, and then you would have two nodes. But there is a potential problem with that, is that depending on which node you're working in, you could be making changes to a drive that you're not aware of, and it can kind of get hard to track sometimes. So if you're connected to the same drive, I just recommend keeping only one connection to that one drive. Don't have it connected over serial and over Ethernet at the same time. And I'm going to change the serial node to Ethernet. Then the next thing I need to do that is very important is click on Edit. The next thing I have to click is Network Adapter. This is very important to select. You can currently see that the broadcast IP is nothing but sets of 255, which is not very helpful for us to find our device. So if I click on Network Adapter, I can now see the network adapters that this machine is currently using. Now, before I open up MotionStudio, I set the static IP address of this computer to be 192.168.10.8. So I'm going to select this network adapter here, since that matches the static IP that I already have set, and then click on OK. You can see the broadcast IP now changes to that same static IP, except the last octet changes to 255. The reason it does that is the broadcast will range from an address of 0 to 255 and find anything in between that. So that's why it automatically changes that last octet to 255. That's completely fine. So click on OK to accept this change. And then now I will click OK one more time. Now you're going to see some warnings with MotionStudio, and this is completely fine. What it's saying right now is that it's going to delete the serial node and change it to something else. So I'll say, yes, I want to do that. And then currently we have the parameter tree open in the background, and it's wanting to make sure that it's okay that I close that tool. So I'm going to say, yes, it's okay to close that tool. It takes a second, and now the screen changes, and you can see we have an Ethernet node. So currently we don't see anything. So the next thing I need to do is click on Ethernet, right-click to get the menu for it, and then now choose Network Scan Ethernet. It takes a second to find it, and then now you can see that we have a MOVIDRIVE selected below Ethernet. Now, if you don't see your MOVIDRIVE, then that means you either have an address problem on your Windows PC side, or you possibly have an address problem with your MOVIDRIVE and it doesn't match, but it should find it quite quickly if you're over Ethernet. Now, if you have a lot of devices on the network, it may take several minutes to populate this if it has to go through several hundred addresses of devices. So that would be the case if you have a lot of machines on the same IP address that you're scanning through. Now, if that were the case and you had hundreds of devices and you only wanted to find one device, there is a little trick you can do to find only that one device and not have to wait several minutes for it to scan all of them just to get to the device you want. So to do that, all you have to do is go back into Network, right-click on it to get your menu, come into Communication, click on Edit one more time. Now in this box here are IP addresses that you can manually add where it will only search for those addresses. So to add that, all you have to do is click this green plus icon. And I'm going to say I only want to find 10.4. So I'm going to type in 192.168.10.4 and then click on OK. Now when I click OK, and then OK, and then now when I rescan this, it will still be very quick because I only have one MOVIDRIVE in this network, but it's only searching for 10.4. So you can imagine if you had hundreds of devices and you knew the specific address that you needed to scan into, this can save you a lot of time. So all I got to do is right-click on Ethernet now and choose Network Scan Ethernet. And it populates it again with only 10.4. All right, That was the brief introduction into MOVITOOLS MotionStudio. In Lab 2, we will discuss how to use MotionStudio to manage the MOVIDRIVE parameter files and how to reset faults if they occur. Thank you for your attention. Take care.